to closing the energy supply shortfall, we are implementing fundamental changes to the structure of the electricity sector. Eskom has established a separate transmission subsidiary and is on track to completing its own unbundling by December 2022. The utility has continued with its intensive maintenance program to reverse many years of neglected maintenance and underperformance of existing plants. To regulate all these reforms, Cabinet yesterday approved amendments to the Electricity Regulation Act for public comment. These far-reaching amendments will enable a competitive market for electricity generation and the establishment of an independent state-owned transmission company.
Right, that's the President there, State of the Nation address announcing some of the reforms that government is proposing to be able to add generation capacity to the grid. And one of those, of course, massive, broad structural reforms of the electricity sector to make sure that they create some competition within the market. And here to talk to us about the Electricity Regulation Amendment Bill and its impact on electricity supply in South Africa, I'm joined by energy expert Ted Blom. Ted, good evening. Thank you very much for your time. A complete change in the structural formation of the electricity sector is what the President was talking about, by and large saying, well, this will add generation capacity to the grid. Do you think this is something that would be welcomed at this time, and it would certainly help with the challenges that we've been seeing around the energy provision in the country?
Okay, yes. I think this is a first attempt. I'm not sure that this is a final attempt and good enough. But it seems to me that now, at last, the message seems to have gotten through to government that the electricity sector is in dire straits, and that Eskom ain't going to be fixed anytime soon, despite the so-called promises from the jockey. And that, in fact, the situation's in fact deteriorated over the last 3 years. And all we've heard from Eskom's leadership is hype and more promises. So at the end of the day, I think the President's hand has been forced, and he's now been forced to open up the sector, which I think was not part of the original game plan, as I understood it, for the last 3 or 4 years. But because the South African economy is now in meltdown, they're now being forced to pull out the jokers. Is it enough? I don't think so. I think there's still plenty of hiccups. The whole efficacy of NERSA leaves a lot to be desired. They've messed up case after case, as you're aware, and that's left us with a 15% tariff increase. And as far as the amendments are concerned, one of the glaring missing elements is that, and it's been a problem, I mean, I've addressed this in the past with NERSA, is that they need to compartmentalize the licenses to specific areas or micro areas. Because in the past, if Eskom defaulted, say for instance on one of its distribution licenses, and you took NERSA up with it, and NERSA's only sanction is to then cancel that license or to suspend it, Eskom only had one distribution license. So that meant all the consumers of Eskom would be switched off. And that obviously is not a tenable situation. Now, under the amendments, that defect is still there. They need to make sure that if you're in Sandton, for instance, as an example, if you have a problem with Eskom's behavior in Sandton, that there's a license particular for Sandton, and that Sandton license then gets suspended or cancelled or whatever for the infringement that the distributor is doing, and not the whole country's electricity being put into jeopardy. And I think that's a major issue. If we don't get that sorted out, then this whole effort is actually a waste of time.
Yeah. Over and above issuing the license for generation, does this bill touch on transmission and distribution and import-export trading in electricity, or is it at the moment just focused on generation?
Okay, so it seems to me that, as I said, this is a first effort by the powers that be, and the delineation is as per the government directive that they divide this thing into three separate units, which they've been in anyway in the last 50 or 100 years. Eskom's always had separation between generation, distribution, and transmission, and the other hangers-on type of departments like HR, finance, and marketing. I mean, of all things for a monopoly, can you believe it? So I think the ultimate answer really would be, given that this government, this ANC government, has captured Eskom, has driven it into the ground, has stolen it blind and empty, that they minimize their participation further in the economy, although there's still ongoing corruption at Eskom under the hand of the new leadership, as will be evidenced in the court case in the next 2 weeks or so. But the fact of the matter is, I think this is step one of a journey. It's not an event. It will be a journey. And eventually, as the government's hand is forced, as they become weaker and weaker, we'll probably see an opening up. There's a major dilemma, though, and that is the licenses that have been granted for generation capacity to the IPPs at exorbitant rates. I mean, I've been on record for many, many years, and now at last, somebody seems to have cottoned on that we're being ripped off blindly by the expensive IPP windows, which are totally corrupted. The only people who are boasting about them being the best in the world and so on are the beneficiaries of those corrupt deals. And I don't see why we can't ask the public protector to go and open up those deals and cancel them, because that's the only way you deal with corrupt activities. Yeah. You cancel them, you shoot them in the head so that they die. Because otherwise, for 20 years, you and I will be subsidizing these highly inefficient, highly erratic, highly unreliable sources of power. Yeah. And then as far as going forward is concerned, everybody holds out green, green, green. Well, it's green that's now landed Europe and North America in the lurch, because it's now clearly become evident that green on its own is not sustainable. Yeah. Battery power is far too expensive and also not sustainable at current technology levels. And that obviously somebody has been making a lot of money by forcing the government's hands. They've all been naive across the world, not just in Africa. They've all been naive or complicit. You can choose which one. Yeah. And they've landed their populations in dire straits with soaring energy prices, over 700% in some countries. And that's killing people. Now in the UK, for instance, they've announced a new energy subsidy to pay out to people to just try and keep them alive during the very, very cold winter.
Yeah. So this new market structure then, Ted, I hear you saying, will not only focus on renewables as part of generation. So any player that wants to come into this space with the market being made more competitive can come in, whether it be with coal or with other hydro energy, whatever other source that they would prefer to create energy.
Yes, I think it's opening up the grid. I think there's a major issue which I see the renewable people are bleating about, and that is the cost of wheeling or transferring your power across Eskom's grid. Whoever owns that grid will still be in a monopolistic situation, and we need to be very careful that isn't exploited. And I can bet you my bottom dollar that that's going to be exploited by the powers that be, because all we've seen from this ANC government is layer upon layer upon layer of corruption. And you'll be at your peril if you for a moment close your eyes and believe that whatever they're doing is in our best interest. I think it's a temporary situation, though, because if I see the market evolving over the next 5 to 10 to 15, 20 years, is that eventually energy will become a proper commodity. Everybody's needs will be much more miniaturized, as you've seen with IT and cell phones and all these other technologies. And people will then eventually be able to get off the grid completely. And the only suckers that will be left behind are the energy-intensive user groups and the indigents who can't afford to put up their own power generation facilities. The rest of the market that actually pays 80% to 90% of them eventually within 5 to 10 years will no longer be part of a grid. The grid will become obsolete.
Ted Blom, appreciate your time. Thank you very much for joining us. Energy expert there, Ted Blom, talking to us on the implications of the amendments to the Electricity Regulation Act. We'll continue.